fears, they might have concerns, they might just be really excited. So you kind of need to be able to choose your people. As you're learning about colleges that you're getting into, also remembering that maybe someone is not getting into that same college. So choosing how you share your information is really important. So what's a good way to respond when someone wants to engage in the college conversation? Why, great Aunt Shirley, I have a few ideas where I'd like to go, but tell me about your college experience, or cousin Jackie's. It's a nice way to kind of frame it in another way so you don't have to give up all your cards at once. You say, how did you know when college was a good fit? Start them talking about their experience. I don't mean you have to keep everything completely private and be secret about it all, but be the person who chooses when to turn the pressure on and off, and be able to really engage in your search yourself. And parents and guardians, you all can really help your junior in this way too. Do your best to try and not make the college topic the center of every conversation for you as well. So it may be that you choose, I've had some seniors this year who've asked, can we choose like 2 nights a week? Can we have not around dinner table, or some limitations so that the student doesn't feel like they're just a commodity going through this process. They don't feel like just a set of test scores or something else or a transcript that's going through the process. So I'd say, be that sounding board. That's my other piece of advice to the families, because you have known your students certainly far longer than the college counselors or probably anybody else. So you're going to be a great sounding board, and you're going to feel out that relationship. You're going to figure out what this new normal is going to be. Help your students keep that positive attitude, help them know themselves better. I've had a lot of parents who have talked through college essays with their students for ideas, but haven't taken a pen to edit. And that sometimes can be a very powerful distinction, having the opportunity to be able to help them remember those engaging ideas and those stories, but not feel like you have to dive in there with them. And that's true about other parts of the application. We do mock interviews, we help students with essays, we help them with their applications, putting together extracurricular activities grids. So you could be that great sounding board that helps them remember those things. And then another word here just about timing. I think it's really easy to feel like you're behind because of all of the noise and pressure out there. It can be very easy to feel like, oh my gosh, I should have been doing all this and I haven't done it yet, but you're not. It's almost a full year before the process really unfolds and the applications are submitted next fall. The first applications were November 1st and 15th for these seniors. So they're sort of in the oven waiting to see what happens, right? But you've got a lot of time in between now and then to really learn what you need to learn. And I think students become more fully formed over these next several months as well. As you go through the end of the junior year, as you go through your junior summer, and you begin to do that research, I think you feel more prepared. So a year from now, you'll all be experts in the schools you're considering, and you'll know much more about the process. And we have the structure in place to help shepherd you through the search and the discovery and the application and the strategy and the decision making. Oops, keep trying to press that button. So I'll talk a little bit more, and then I'm going to turn it over to one of my colleagues. Lots of factors that go into this application review, and there's some things that you have a great deal of control over. What you did in high school the last couple of years, that's already in print. What you do from now on, you've got a lot of ownership over that, and that's only one example. In terms of your application, though, you run primarily on your academic record. So what you're doing this year is important beyond just this first quarter, what you're doing through the end of the year, and even what you choose to take for next year and your first quarter first semester grades, because those often will play a role in the review process as well. And colleges enroll students from independent schools and public schools and all sorts of different kinds of schools who've taken a rigorous curriculum all across the country and around the world. And I hope you can come with me and try and imagine how each of those schools might be different from one another, how their grading is different, how their curriculum is different, how their programs overall are quite different. We're all a bit like apples and oranges in this process when we're thinking about how these applications come together. So the context of what happens in an experience at Berkeley Carroll and how our students are taking advantage of what is available is really important. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on when we talk about how the transcript and the other parts of the application come together. You'll begin to learn also that colleges and universities are searching for reasons to admit students. It's true. They do need to have students there to be able to enroll them and to be able to continue operating as organizations. But it's also important to understand that if you've been through the process before, and parents and guardians, I mean, it may be a little bit different this time around. As I said, things have changed, and I think it's important, for us to be able to talk about some of these differences. Colleges have increased their national and their global application pools. Generally, the number of applicants they receive is increased. The most selective colleges in the country are more selective than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So those things have certainly changed. It's more important than ever to ensure that your college list ends up being balanced, realistic, and well-reasoned. And we'll help coach you on that. We're always going to be there for you as you dream about a place and as you reach for a place, but we also want to make sure that the rest of your college list, or even that about your application and about its prospects going into the process. So I think you'll find that we're pretty straight shooters. At the start of the pandemic, most colleges didn't require testing. They dropped that. And some have remained, many actually have remained test optional, while a few university state systems and some individual colleges and universities have gone back to requiring testing. But what happened when this change happened, the colleges at the same time also enhanced many of their virtual offerings. The videos that they had were no longer these canned videos of, these moving characters that you can't believe are actual real people. They've offered lots of things virtually. They've offered lots of opportunities for students to learn more about them. And it also means that both of these innovations contributed to increased applications, especially in that 2021 timeframe, but they haven't gone down. So I think we'll find that we're still feeling some of those residual effects. The colleges themselves have also changed a great deal. I think if you went to visit schools that maybe if those of you that have already gone to college go back and visit some schools that you visited the first time around, they're going to look wildly different. And they're different in terms of their profiles too. I did my undergrad at Boston University, and we had friends that went over at Northeastern University, and most were really attracted to the Northeast. Now BU, I think this past year they were admitted about 16% of their applicants, and Northeastern admitted about 9% of their applicants, and they've got students from all over the world on both campuses. So they got more selective. They also got different. They just are different and interesting. So I think you're going to find that sometimes there are going to be names that are unfamiliar right now that will become more familiar to you as you engage more and more in this process overall. There's also demographics and institutional priorities, and we'll do a lot of talking about this with you as families and do a lot of talking with the students, especially about how this looks. But some of these demographics can affect your application as well. 59.5% of graduating high school students applying to college identify as female. So if I'm a college that's trying to keep a balanced percentage of male and female students, and then including students that are non-binary, et cetera, you're going to find that this can affect the admissions process as well. The ability to pay can sometimes be a factor in admissions decisions when colleges are need aware, and full pay students can sometimes be unexpectedly awarded scholarships. We always work with families who have financial need to make sure that we're carefully crafting a list of colleges that's going to meet that need, because the direction of that college list requires that to be one of the many factors that we consider. So again, just kind of keeping in mind all of those things that we find important as we put this together. Colleges have objective criteria, grades, scores, program that they care about, but they also care about who they're admitting to their community. So personal qualities matter. That's why they ask for letters of recommendation. So your counselors, we will be writing one letter of recommendation on your behalf, and you'll be choosing a couple of teachers who you know well, and we'll give you some guidelines on that a little bit later, and then remind you many times as we often do. Admissions to one program within a university could be drastically different than another. If you're applying to, say, the film program versus the psychology program, that might be different at the place that you're applying. And it may be important to look at your choice of school or college when applying within that university setting. But for most liberal arts colleges, I'd say psychology, English, history, biology, economics, those usually round out the top 5, the most popular ones. So for most liberal arts colleges, they're usually not admitting by major. We asked the juniors the other day in our last junior seminar, who knows what they want to major in, who's unsure? Most had some ideas. There weren't too many that were completely unsure, but most students don't have an idea exactly what they want to major in. And they may not by this time next year. They may have a few ideas, and that's actually okay as well. We work with both kinds of students in that regard. The global, geographic, socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, and gender diversity can all be factors in creating a college community. So that's going to reflect the world that we live in, and that's the role of many colleges, especially when you look at their mission statements and you look at their priorities. Athletics, legacy status, special talents, portfolios could influence admission or not at all, depending upon who the student is, what the school is, what the situation is. So again, we walk with you through this process. We find it really important for us to meet you where you are and to be able to engage with you as you're discovering things along the way as well. So we try and be experts on the 2,500 colleges, but we're not experts on all of them. So sometimes you will see that we'll do some research alongside of you. And that's, again, it makes this job less boring than it would be if everybody was exactly the same. And if you only applied to one college, that would make it very simple, right? So I think it's important to talk about these realities since they do influence the colleges and universities that we'll suggest as part of your preliminary college list. And I'm going to ask Ms. Chen to come up and talk with you about what to expect over the next several months.
Hello, everyone. I gotta get this a little bit lower because I'm significantly shorter. It's really nice to see you all. My name is Joelle Chen, or Ms. Chen for the students. And I'm going to talk just a little bit more about what's coming ahead. So you all, if you entered this space, probably got a yellow sheet with important dates for juniors. For those joining us via Zoom, you probably received an email with this information. And if you don't have that, I promise you, we will email you many, many more times with this information. But we wanted to give you a little bit of an outline of what the next coming months and next year is really going to look like. So I'm sure for the students and maybe families as well, you are all waiting, biting your nails, figuring out which three of us are going to be your college counselor. So that information is going to come shortly. So probably after Thanksgiving break, we will be able to share with you which of the three of us will be working primarily. But as Ms. Middleton mentioned, we are a hive. We are a collaborative here to support you through this journey. An important piece of this journey for college applications is self-evaluation. So we met with the junior class, I think last week, to talk a little bit about this process. And when we did, we handed you all this little packet of questions for you to answer to start thinking a little bit about what you are looking for in college. What values are important to you? What interests spark joy for you? So that's going to be an important piece of this first step in the college search process. So you're going to fill that out if you haven't already. I'm looking to intimidate if you haven't already. And you're going to fill out another questionnaire, and that's going to be through SCORE. So SCORE is a system that you all will become very, very familiar with. It's how you will let us know what schools you're applying to. It's a great search database to figure out what schools are of interest to you. And you're going to learn a little bit more about that in the meetings that we have with the junior class. On that database, students and parents will be filling out, and parents and guardians will be filling out a survey to, again, share a little bit more about your interests, what you're looking for. This helps guide us as we're preparing this list of preliminary colleges for you to consider. But it's also helpful for you all to think about your priorities, what's important for you in this process, what you're interested in this process. As Ms. Middleton mentioned, you'll likely get a list of around 30 schools after our first couple of meetings to start thinking about colleges and universities that are going to be a really good fit for you. That is not a final list. That is just a starting guide to get you going to see, okay, I like this type of school, I don't like this type of school. So after we get these surveys back from you, and we need these surveys in order for you to schedule a meeting. So if you do not do your surveys, you will not have a meeting. Pretty fair. So you'll fill out those surveys, you'll turn them into Mrs. Dunn, and you'll be able to schedule an initial meeting with us. So the first meeting will be one-on-one, us with the student, getting to know you a little bit more, what you're looking for, what excites you. And then after that, we'll have a family meeting together with your parents or guardians to really get to know you all in this process, because parents and guardians, you play a really big role in this as well. While the students are in the front seat of the car, I think of this as kind of those fake cars that you learn to drive in, where you also have the passenger wheel and you can push the brakes a little bit. That's where the parents are sometimes and the guardians. You're there to help guide along, to support, to also share some context that we might not know. As Ms. Middleton mentioned, you know your students for 15, 16, 17 years. You know them very well. So you're here to help support us and support them along this journey. So we'll have that first meeting at the beginning of the new year in January, most likely, and then we'll have that second family meeting. These are not the only meetings we will have with you. They're just to start. We will have so many meetings with you all, and we are available for help at any time you need during this process. So we'll have these 2 initial meetings, and then from there, it really depends on how much you need and how much support you want from our office. And again, it's not just meeting with me or Ms. Middleton or Mr. Almonte. It might just be stopping by, and if any of us are available, to just chat a little bit to support you in that process. So you're going to have these visits, you're going to chat with us, and things might change. You might come in saying, I'm going to major in biology and I want to go to a research institution, and then you go and visit a research institution, you've decided I'm majoring in philosophy and I want a small liberal arts college. And that's okay. Your priorities will change over this course, and allow them to do so. Open yourself up to different possibilities of what you think you might want and what you might actually discover as you visit colleges and get to learn a little bit more about them. So for juniors who are maybe studying away in this upcoming semester or going to an abroad program, we understand that that might be a little anxiety provoking, that you're going off in your junior spring. So we're here to help in advance. We're also here via Zoom, that we can meet with you, meet with your parents and guardians, and make sure by the time you get to the summer, you're feeling good and ready. Which, speaking of the summer's gonna be a busy time for you all. And we encourage you to plan ahead. Senior fall is busy. If you have any friends who are seniors, you know. You have senior speaker series, so you're preparing your senior speech. If you're doing SRD, you're finalizing your project. Maybe you're doing senior scholars and you're writing a 30-page paper. You're also still visiting schools and visiting colleges. You also are a young person who wants to have a social life. And if you want to have a social life, you're going to have to start working early on the college application process. I have one student who is going through it, really finished up, did so much work over the summer, and he was like, Miss Chen, I am so happy I planned ahead, because now he's not as stressed. He had a lot of work that he had to do, but he was able to work over the summer. You have 3 months from June until August when you return, September when you return, to really start to dive into this college process. So that might mean looking at the Common App personal statement. So the Common App we'll talk a little bit more about, but it's the application database for over 1,000 colleges. And you're going to have to submit a personal statement for a majority of them. So start thinking about that. And if you can get a first draft done by the end of the summer, you are in a great place. We're also going to have essay writing workshops throughout the beginning of the summer to help start that process, especially if you're someone like me. It takes a second to get started, but once I do, I can keep going and really get in that writing. But if you need that brainstorming space, or to think a little bit creatively, we'll have these essay writing workshops available to you. You also might want to just start filling out the Common App. It has a lot of biographical data. It might have information about what your parents do. Oftentimes I talk to teenagers and they're like, I have no idea what my parents do. Start to fill that out now, because what you don't want is the day of the deadline, parents and guardians are busy and you need to fill out that information section. So you might start filling out that data. You might start thinking about your activities list, and we'll talk a little bit more about that over the summer. But there are little things that you can do to make this process enjoyable. because that's what it should be. You're preparing for the next 4 or 5 years on your own, exploring your interests, your passions, diving deep into the intellectual curiosities that really propel you forward. So it should be enjoyable and not something filled with stress. So planning ahead is really going to help to make it easier. You'll also have a reboot camp the day before classes start. So Ms. Middleton mentioned institutional priorities. So we'll talk a little bit more about how institutions review an application. You'll also next year think about early applications. So by the first week of October, you will have known if you are applying early action, which is a non-binding application process, or early decision, which is applying to your top choice, saying you really want to go there and it's admitted and attending. So you'll figure that out by the beginning of October because a lot of those deadlines, November 1st. By the end of October, you'll likely have a preliminary final list of colleges that you will send to our office. We ask for that because again, it's this collaborative process of making sure your list is balanced. So if we see your final list and we're like, okay, the student might be reaching a little bit, we want to make sure that they also have some schools that we think are going to be solid foundations. Or maybe they're not reaching high enough. Maybe they haven't really taken the leap to challenge themselves to that highly selective institution. Let's encourage them to do so. So we have these deadlines that you'll see on the sheet and that we'll continue to share with you in place to make this process as smooth as possible and as enjoyable and fun as possible as well. So when we get to June of 2023, which is only a couple months away, I cannot believe 2023 is about to happen. But when we get to that time, you will probably be preparing to go on summer vacation. Maybe you're doing an internship or a part-time job, or maybe you're studying abroad for the summer or traveling with family. I want you to also think about this college process and know that we are here 2/3 of the summer to meet with you, whether it's you stopping by 181 Lincoln Place or setting up a Zoom meeting with us. So that way we are available to make this process seamless. So what I'm going to do now is just connect over to my colleague, Mr. Almonte, to talk a little bit more about thinking through this process.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Luis Almonte. I'm an associate director of college counseling here. And we're talking about this pretty layered process, this pretty complex process that's going to span over, between now and over a year. But really where this all starts is getting to know yourself and getting to know who you are, right? And that's kind of a large question to ask yourself at 16 or 17. So we will say that we understand that you are an ever-changing human being, but it's nice at this point in your life to check in with yourself about who you are right here, right now, and the things that you like, the things that you value, your wants, your needs, what drives you, how you enjoy learning, what types of environments do you enjoy being in? Do you like being around, a space where there's a large amount of people? Do you like more small, tight-knit communities? All of these are really important to start kind of being able to reflect on with yourself and eventually be able to articulate to other people. Because throughout this process, you're going to be asked a lot of questions by your college counselor, by your family, and eventually by the colleges themselves when you're applying on their application. So really kind of checking in with who you are and where you see yourself going in the future is really kind of the starting point of this process and where you should all be at right now. There's a variety of different institutions out there, and there's so many different students and so many different personalities. And really it's about making the best match for you in terms of the colleges that we're putting on your preliminary college list, and that eventually that you're choosing to apply to for your final college list. So for example, maybe you're a student that has been doing well at Berkeley Carroll, but you absolutely do not like taking the humanities and you are more of a STEM student, and you maybe can kind of take some time to really kind of reflect on that. And maybe it's the opportunity that in the future you might want to attend a technical institute where you can focus on just the STEM aspect of your academics. Or maybe you're more of that well-rounded student. You love taking the STEM courses, you love taking the humanities, you love the opportunity to take art electives. Maybe a liberal arts college is more up your alley. We've worked with a variety of different students that, because of being in this environment at Berkeley Carroll, they truly appreciate being part of a tight-knit community, having access to their teachers and being able to meet one-on-one with them. So they guide their process by looking at smaller schools. While some other students have really reflected on their high school career and realized, hey, I've been part of this really small community for my entire life. I'm ready for something mid-sized or a large-size institution. And understanding that with that large-size institution might become larger classes, lecture classes instead of seminar discussions. So really kind of, like I said, just kind of having that conversation with yourself. And parents and families, what I would say is where you can kind of collaborate with your student is understanding and helping them get there, right? Asking them like, what type of school would you like? Could you see yourself at a large institution? You've always been at a small school. Do you think that you can handle, some change, or do you want to continue being at a small school? I think a lot of times families, sometimes they'd be like, well, what do you think of Amherst? And the students like, I have no idea about Amherst. But maybe it's aspects about the college that you know about that you can kind of pitch to that student. So that way they can start thinking about that. And the opportunities are really endless. Like we have students here that are thriving in the arts and decide to do art at a liberal arts college, or maybe they're going to go and pursue a Bachelor of Fine Arts at an art school where it's more conservatory style, where the majority of what they're doing with their classes and their time is devoted to art, or is devoted to theater, or is devoted to film. So really kind of just deep diving is really what we suggest at this point in time. And how we help you through this process is with those surveys that Ms. Middleton and Ms. Chen talked about earlier. It's going to ask you a wide variety of questions. It's going to ask you to rate things. This survey and score is going to ask you about things that you've been reading, the accomplishment that you're most proud of. There's some questions that talk about your favorite classes, to really get an understanding, for one, you to understand yourself, and then on us on the receiving end is to get a better understanding of what you're looking for, to be able to help tailor your process and speak with you and discuss schools with you that are right up your alley. And this is going to be an ongoing process because, as Ms. Chen mentioned, sometimes those priorities change. Sometimes you go and visit a school and maybe you're all gung-ho about a large institution, and you get there and you get overwhelmed. And you come back to your counselor and you say, I know I said in the beginning of this process that I wanted 20,000 students, I actually want 2,000, right? And then we'll be able to kind of tailor your list and give you different suggestions. But this is going to be an ongoing process. And a big part of it is, like I said, being able to have those conversations with yourself, have your conversations out loud with your family, with your counselor. And then eventually when you start realizing what you want and identifying schools that have what you want and what you need, it all kind of starts to fall into place about what's gravitating towards you. And a big part of that helps is doing research on these schools and being knowledgeable about the school that you're thinking of applying to. So there's a wide variety of ways to do research. So to kind of backtrack a bit, eventually you'll get a college list with 30 schools on it. So 30 sounds like a lot of colleges, but it's split up into 3 different categories. So it's going to be the reach category. So traditionally selected institutions, or based on a student academic profile, it's going to be, a reach. Then there's middles, or sometimes schools call these targets. Here at Berkeley Carroll, we call them middle schools, meaning your numbers are right where the school is looking for, but it's a 50-50 split. It could go either way. And then the final category are foundations. Other institutions call them safeties, but at Berkeley Carroll, we call them foundations, meaning you're well above the profile that the school is looking for, and ideally, like, it should go pretty well. So ideally it's going to be 10 schools in each of those categories. So it breaks it down and makes it a bit more manageable. And ideally, your job is to be kind of breaking that list down, and any other schools outside of that list that you and your family are looking at, to create a well-balanced list with some reaches, with some middles, and with foundations. And research is key. So ways to conduct research, so that online system that Ms. Chen spoke about earlier, SCORE, eventually you'll all have access to that, including the parents, sometime this month. And with that, it's basically an online database that allows students to do research and makes it super easy. It'll show you average SAT, ACT scores. It'll have a bunch of different videos. It'll tell you demographics by, state, race. It'll tell you like some financial aid information. It'll have video tours, interviews with students, things like that. So it's a really comprehensive software that I encourage you to lean into. And then there's more official guides that, the College Board has a handbook. We also have our Berkeley Carroll handbook that'll guide you throughout this process. One that we will actually provide you all with is the FISC Guide to Colleges. It's the, honestly, I think it's like one of the best books that's out there. So basically for really well-known colleges and colleges that you might be looking at, it boils them down to about 1.5 to 2-page summary about what that school is known for, what the culture is like, academics that are really popular. So we'll actually provide a copy of a FISC guide to all of you for all the students to be able to look at that. And then I really like the FISC because it'll show you similar institutions that students have applied to that cross applications with that school that you're researching in the guide at that time. There's also the college website, so every school is going to have their own website that's going to break down majors, different programs, specialized programs, admissions criteria. So we definitely encourage you to look at web information as well too. And then eventually you will be visiting ideally these colleges or universities virtually or in person. So the post-pandemic, the virtual options have really kind of just boomed in terms of what they're offering. As well as with having a bit more control over the pandemic and the COVID-19 virus. The on-campus visits are fully available for parents and students to take advantage of. So we highly encourage that because that's really where you're going to understand what the campus community is like. You're going to be there, you can see the students, you can people watch, you can learn and take an information session and campus tour, and really start asking yourself, can I see myself here? Do they have my major? What type of social opportunities are here? How far is it from an actual city? What's the surrounding community like? If I would have a weekend off at school and I was exploring the surrounding area, what would I have at my disposal? And that really is kind of a game changer. And is it going to be the reality that you'll be able to visit every single school on your preliminary college list? Probably not. But I would say the ones that are rising to the top for you, or maybe if you find yourself in a particular area, it's always an opportunity to, look at a campus or sign up for an information session and tour. Majority of schools, I would say a good amount of them, should do something where they track demonstrated interest, and basically they want to see that you're doing research and that you're putting in effort to get to know and research the school. And basically they take that into consideration in their admissions process. So it's always good to sign up for official information sessions and campus tours because it's like bonus points on your application. Instead of, think of it as dating, like if you're interested in somebody, you want to express that. Colleges like to see that. Otherwise, it looks like you're just kind of like just shooting your shot, just to shoot your shot, which isn't, strategic. There's love advice for all of you as well too. So, and I would say like a good place to start too is like, I would say first you should probably start large scale, right? So like if the student's in between, like, do I want a small school? Do I want a large school? Do I want a traditional campus or do I want an urban campus? There's a lot of schools in the New York area where you'll be able to at least figure that out. So for instance, like Barnard is an all women's college in Uptown New York, right across the street from Columbia University, 2 traditional campuses, 1 small size, 1 mid-size, and then NYU, for instance, is a large urban campus, right? So even in our backyard, you can really start understanding the different institutions and what they might offer. And maybe that school isn't necessarily one that you're looking at, but you can understand what an urban campus or what a small traditional campus in a city might look like before you go and see a school like Boston University or Northeastern. And times where I would say like where the college process should really start by the time that you have your list, ideally President's Day and the day after President's Day, those are 2 days that you will have off, where most students will start to go and see a school or 2, maybe 2 or 3. And majority of students are starting to identify schools that they want to visit in person, and they start doing that over spring break. So we highly encourage you to do that. I always think of that in my head as like the official starting point of where students are really kind of getting out there, getting to understand the physical location of a campus, get more in-depth information past just, doing some online research or a FISC guide or some word of mouth, and really doing a deeper dive and learning about the institution from the institution itself. There are other web resources, so Big Future, SCORE, as I mentioned earlier, College Navigator, Fairtest.org, financial aid. And then we absolutely recommend getting in touch with BC alumni that are attending certain institutions. So if there's certain schools that you like and you really find yourself falling in love with that school and you say, do you know anybody that goes there? We actually have a database of students where we can see current students that we have on that campus in the past couple of years, and we can get you in contact with them so that way you can ask questions. They understand the BC experience and asking them what their transition was like. Yeah, so on and so forth. And of course, your fabulous counselors are a wealth of knowledge. We can help you understand, you know, what might be a good fit for you. And, you know, like the more that we know, the better it is for us to get a better match for you in terms of the schools that we're pitching your way. Because, you know, like I said, there's so many schools out there, and there's schools that you know, and there's schools that you don't know, but that we know about, that we know have really great programs. So we ask you to keep an open mind and an open heart and an open, you know, mouth in terms of this conversation that we're having that's ongoing, because you'll be pleasantly surprised, you know, what you might find out there, or if certain schools where if you say, I really like this one, are there other schools that are like similar in terms of this campus or this particular major? And then we'll say, yeah, actually, there's all these other schools, why don't you check these out? So really, it's an ongoing conversation throughout this process. And in terms of research and visits, I talked a little bit about this. So, you know, local visits and like I said, in the New York area, you know, whether you're going upstate or staying in New York City, there's a ton of colleges. There's the New School, Pace University, NYU, Barnard, Columbia, Purchase, Bard, you know, so on and so forth. There's a ton of them out there. In terms of official campus tour and information session, that's really where, you know, the school's gonna be in front of you doing a formal, usually it's about 30 minutes to 45-minute presentation about the school culture, academic programs, anything that kind of makes the school stand out, social life, social opportunities on campus, clubs and organizations. So that's a good way to get just a really strong sense of the school. And then be able to do a walking tour, and they also do this virtually. So these are opportunities where you can sign up and actually join the mailing list. And for schools that track demonstrated interest, like I said, this is a good thing. It's what certain schools would like to see. There are a variety of different visits that you can take advantage of. So there are official campus tours and information sessions, as I just mentioned. Some schools will actually let you sit in on a class. So that's an opportunity. When I worked at Lehigh University, we actually had a program called View. So students could actually attend 2 classes and then have lunch with current Lehigh students. You can attend an open house. Open houses are really great because a lot of times they have faculty from different departments come and do formal presentations, as well as answer questions for different students. Virtually, I've been seeing this year that there's sometimes where we'll have chats with students that are just on a Zoom and they're just answering questions, kind of like a panel. So there's a wide variety of ways that you can express your interest and take advantage of different opportunities that the school is, you know, presenting to all of you. And then, you know, if you have like a specific thing that you're looking for, you can also contact departments at the school. So maybe it's the LGBTQ Center, maybe it's the Center for Disability Services. It could be the Women's Center, the Athletics Department, and really kind of getting more information about specific things that you're looking for, or criteria that you have on your list of wants and needs for a school, and being able to have a conversation with those offices on campus to gather more information, gather more data to understand if this is the type of place that is providing resources outside of just academics that you're looking for that you can take advantage of. I talked about virtual options. Interviews are also something that schools offer. So some schools offer interviews, some do not. So typically larger institutions are not going to offer interviews because they don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to be able to interview every applicant that they have. But I would say more smaller liberal arts colleges, some medium-sized institutions will have optional interviews that you can take advantage of before or after you apply. So this is going to vary from school to school. So this is where kind of like everybody's college list gets extremely different. And some students are interviewing a lot and some are not, because it depends what schools they're looking at. And I would say the earliest you're probably going to be able to start interviewing is this summer. So at the end of the spring semester into the summer, some schools will offer interviews for rising seniors to be able to conduct an interview that basically is an evaluative process. It's basically them just trying to get to know you as an applicant, ask you some questions, get some more information, and you to get to know more information about the institution. Some interviews are evaluative, meaning it's going to be part of your admissions application and something that they consider when deciding if they're going to admit you or not, while other ones are more informational. And like our office said, we will help you prepare for those interviews. And make sure that you are understanding what you're about to walk into, that you're practicing some answers, and that you're going into that interaction very confident. And finally, it's just observation and gut instincts. So sometimes, you're going to be going on a slew of college visits, and eventually some of them start to blend together because a lot of the information is the same. We have similar majors and liberal arts and holistic review, but sometimes it really just comes down to you're on campus or you're deciding between two schools, and you just have to kind of like trust your instincts and think about where can I see myself being happiest in the class, and where can I see myself being happiest outside of the class, because college is so much more than you just completing your major. You're going to be living there. This is going to be your home. So really kind of trusting your instincts and your sounding boards to understand that you're making the best decision for yourself for the colleges that you do apply to, and then later on down the line, the college that you ultimately decide to enroll. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back over to Ms. Chen to talk about what's in an application.
Hey y'all, I'm back. So we are going to talk about an application. We talked a lot about that today. So what actually makes a college application? So the first thing is the application itself. I mentioned the Common App. That's what a lot of you will be using. Probably 99% of you will be applying to at least one school on the Common App. Again, it has over 1,000 colleges and universities available. It's very straightforward, and what's lovely is once you fill it out, you can kind of just submit to the other schools. They might have different pieces that they're requiring, but pretty straightforward. But maybe you're someone who wants to go abroad. Maybe you're looking to study away not just for a semester, but spend your 4 years in the UK. Maybe you're using UCAS system then, that's for the UK application process. Or maybe you're going to Canada. You're like, I want to go abroad, but not too far. Then you might be using a specific application for each university there. So all different schools might have a different process, but at the same time, it all comes down to this general application that gets your biographical information and your academic information. So as Ms. Middleton mentioned at the beginning, the academic piece plays a really big role in the review process. Oftentimes, your academics are guiding the decision-making process. So your transcript is incredibly important for this review. And when we're looking at the transcript on the college side, it's looking at it through context. And that context is provided by the school profile. So almost every school that you apply to will also receive a school profile. And that profile gives context about Berkeley Carroll. So it talks about our advanced curriculums, it talks about specialized courses like American Studies that you all are taking right now, or maybe you're doing SRD or senior scholars. It gives context about the rigor of your curriculum. Have you challenged yourself, particularly in the math or sciences, or maybe you're more of a humanities person? Have you really deep dived into the arts? So it gives a fuller picture of who you are as an academic student. We'll talk a little bit more about recommendations and test scores a little bit later, but those are also going to be pieces of the application as a whole. That personal statement that I mentioned, maybe starting over the summer, that is a really fun part of the review process. So prior to coming to Berkeley Carroll, I worked at NYU for 6 years, and my favorite part of that job was reading the application essays, because that was the one opportunity I had to get to know a little bit more about the student. So it gives you a little glimpse into who you are. It's only 650 words. It's not going to be your entire life story, but it's a really fun time to share a little bit about an experience you had or a perspective that you want to share with the admissions committee. So that adds a little bit of the personal piece to it. You might have supplemental essays. So depending on the college you're applying to, they're going to ask for the personal statement. That's pretty broad and general. And then they might ask for supplemental essays that are specific to the college or institution. So they might ask, why are you interested in Oberlin? Or you want to go to University of Miami, tell us why. But it might be very broad and vague. A student who's applying to University of Chicago had to answer a question, what wisdom would a wisdom tooth give? I don't know how to answer that question, but it's just a great way to learn a little bit more about your intellectual curiosity. What kind of makes you think? How are you interested in the world? Another question was asking if you could design any college course, what would it be? So it can range from very school specific to a little bit more broader and creative opportunities to share different aspects of your personality. As Mr. Almonte mentioned, it might have interviews included that might be required or optional. For interviews that are optional, oftentimes as an office, we encourage you to take advantage of them because it's just another way to highlight and share a little bit more about you. And actually, we're preparing you along the way for it. So those questionnaires that you're going to be answering, a lot of the times, those are questions that are asked in college interviews. So it's another way to start thinking about who you are and what you want to share in your college application. You'll do an activities list. So on the common application, there's space for 10 activities for you to include. And those activities are not just clubs or organizations that you've done at Berkeley Carroll. It might be part-time jobs. It might be volunteer work. Or maybe you have significant family responsibilities. That's included in the activities. So start to think about those things that have mattered to you. Or if you're not as engaged as maybe you would have liked to be, and that's understandable, it's been a hectic past couple of years to say the least. Think about utilizing the rest of this year to get involved in organizations that you care about. We always used to say in admissions that it is about quality, not quantity. You do not have to fill every 10 activity, but what colleges are looking for is what is it that you do outside of the classroom? What are you interested in? What passions do you have? And can you share a little bit with us? And then depending on the type of application you have, maybe you're applying to the arts, you might have a portfolio component. So that might be collaborating and putting together your your artistic work, or maybe you're applying for the drama department and you're getting monologues together, or maybe you're going for dance and you're submitting a dance portfolio, or maybe you're not applying for the arts, but the arts have been essential to who you are. And so schools might have supplement or optional portfolios for you to share a little bit more information about your interests, or an abstract space for those scientists among us who have conducted research, whether through SRD or on their own, and really want to highlight that interest in it. So this application really does boil down to about 12, 15 pages or so. And in those 12, 15 pages are all of this information to kind of give a little bit of a story of who you are as a scholar and who you are as a person. And we'll talk throughout this process of how that's reviewed and how that's reviewed differently at each school. But as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about recommendations and test scores a little bit more in depth. So Ms. Middleton, you want to come back up and chat about recommendations?
Ari, Mr. Mike.
You selected a
So just briefly, we've always included some of those inside. They come from recommendation forms that you might see colleges asking
Please,
teachers
Mr. Mike.
want to know a little bit about who you are as a thinker, who you are in terms of classroom. Mostly the teacher recommendations are focused on what you do in the classroom. We're not going to ask you to ask your teachers now, but I do want you to begin thinking about it. You'll be asking 2 teachers who've taught you in the 11th or 12th grades in different academic subjects. So typically colleges will ask for those to be 2 teachers that came before the end of high school. So that's why we say 11th or 12th grade. We say different academic subjects because they typically will say math, science, English, history, foreign language, and most often they'll ask for 2 of them. They do ask for academic subjects, unless you're applying to an arts program, in which you would need an arts letter of recommendation. But students who, as Ms. Chen was saying, students who find that they gain what they love to do is also the arts in addition to their academic classes. Here, all of these are academic courses. Then you may ask an art teacher as well. And then every one of you would have a counselor letter. So one of us would be writing a letter of recommendation on your behalf. And I like these two different kinds of recommendations. The letters that the counselors write, much more of the floodlight view. Who are you within the school community? Is there anything unique that we need to talk about on your transcript? Is there anything that you've done in transition between classes or in coming to Berkeley Carroll or have done in terms of a program away? And we get to narrate those bits and pieces of the application. Plus, we get to talk a little bit about you outside the classroom. The teachers really give a slice of life on who you are in class, who you are interacting with your peers, how you bring up ideas, how you view literature or science or mathematics, whatever topic it is you're discussing. So I'll leave that there with recommendations. We do a formal request in May. Teachers write their letters of recommendation over the summer. We have a single due date, so they're all ready to go by the time you've made your decision on where to apply and when. And with that, I'll pass the baton back over to Mr. Almonte for a few words about testing.
Hello. So a lot of you probably been getting emails about test prep opportunities. This is the face of the name, but to talk about testing. So most of you have had some experience with testing, whether it's taking the PSAT, which you all just did, or taking the Compass practice exams, which you took a practice SAT or practice ACT, and then you were able to consult with Compass to figure out which might be the best exam for you. But basically the SAT or ACT are the exams that the colleges and universities take as standardized testing. Right now we're in a weird kind of pause at the moment because of COVID and people not being able to access testing centers and fear of infection, things like that. Majority of schools have gone test optional, and even before, prior to COVID, there was a good chunk of schools that were already test optional. Our office advises that students still take test prep and still take testing because certain schools, are only test optional until this year with an update coming. Some schools have gone back to requiring testing, which is, it's not a landslide of schools, but for instance, this year MIT did require testing. So our philosophy is that you do test prep, you take the test, you have a test score that you might be able to use. If it's really good, we'll use it. If it's not, or if it's not the best representation of you as an applicant and you have the option to not submit it, we can kind of discuss that and figure out the best strategy for you. But the first part, I think, is understanding which tests that you might be taking, which I think a good amount of you already know. If you're taking the SAT or ACT, we do not advise to take both because they're wildly different tests in terms of just how they're designed, timing, things like that. We've seen great success with our students that have excelled in one test and have prepared for that test and then been able to take it more than once. We advise that you take it more than once because then it has the opportunity for a super score. So if you did really good, for instance, on the SAT, on the critical reading in March, and then May you did better on the math, you can put those two scores together to have a higher score, which is called a super score. So that's why we advise that our students take it, do the test prep, take the exam, take it more than once. If you feel like you're rising, and I would say most students take it around 2 times, there's I would say a certain number of students that might take it a 3rd or a 4th time if they're improving. But typically after that, most students will plateau. And like I said, we don't know what the landscape of testing is going to be like year to year. Certain schools have extended their test optional policy until around 2026. Other schools have only told us that this is the last year where they're going to be test optional and we're waiting for an update. So it's better to be prepared based on the schools that you might be looking at. And have that is something that you can use if you need it or if it's required, or something that you could admit if you don't feel confident in it. In terms of test prep opportunities, so I've been emailing all the junior parents and guardians as well as the students about our bespoke classes. So our SAT class just started. I believe we're in our 3rd week, but there is still time to sign up for the ACT bespoke class. So if you feel like you're going to do better in a classroom environment, it's a virtual class that will start on January 7th to prepare students for the April ACT. Otherwise, There are other test prep opportunities that, you know, you can take advantage of. Certain students will just use an SAT or ACT manual and prepare by themselves. Some will use Khan Academy, which is free. While other students might do one-on-one tutoring from one of these test prep organizations. So, you know, whatever you feel like is going to be best for you, I would say once you get assigned your counselor, let your counselor know what you're doing. We'll check in about what you're doing in terms of test prep. And if you're not set up or you need to be pointed in the right direction, your counselor can help you. In terms of timeline, everyone's going to be on a very different timeline. So some of you are test prepping right now. Some of you might not have started. That's completely okay. I would say the general timelines that we see are typically students starting now to prepare for the spring SAT and ACT. And then other students that are starting in the beginning of January to prepare for the late spring, early summer SAT, ACTs. And then if you feel like you're the type of student that you would just want to solely focus on testing and not balance that with your classes, you would prepare in the summer with your test prep to prepare for the fall SATs and ACTs. So every person's timeline is going to be different. But I would say like you want to prioritize knowing yourself and knowing your student, what might work best for them. Some students like to get test prep out of the way, do it in the spring, take their end of spring, early summer testing, and then be done with it, know what their score is, and kind of move on with the rest of the process. And like I said, other students want to finish their classes, focus on test prep in the summer, and then be able to take their testing late summer, early senior year. If testing is not for you, like I said, if you're taking the exam and you're not performing how you want to, like I said, majority of schools right now are test optional, with the caveat that, you know, things might change. But even before that, there were a large number of schools, even when testing was required, there were a large number of schools that were test optional. And we can assist students in terms of what their list looks like, what their test scores are, and advise them and counsel them correctly in the best possible route that would work for them. And Ms. Middleton with financial aid.
And this is the last slide. So you can go home soon and have dinner. I did want to talk a few minutes about financial aid because for many families, this is a really important part of the process. The most important thing I can say is start the conversation now. So if you are on financial aid here at Berkeley Carroll, or if you just are thinking ahead for what the next 4 years might look like in terms of paying for college education, starting that conversation as a family now is a really important step to take. One of the things that we've done this year that's a little bit different than prior years is we have contracted with an organization called College Money Method. And College Money Method is doing a series of actually 6 different programs for us. They work their programs, or their program is designed to work developmentally. So there's a specific program for 9th grade families, one for 10th grade families, and these 3 are programs, the 3 that you see up there by those dates are the 3 programs that the proprietor of College Money Method has designed to include junior families. So a couple of them, one of them includes, that first one will also include senior families. The second one will also include sophomore families. And then specifically the April 19th is for 11th graders. These are all going to be virtual. So you don't have to come to this cold room, even though it's really nice to see you all. But you can participate in these programs. We've actually contracted with College Money Method with 3 other Brooklyn area independent schools. So we really feel like the organization is bringing a lot of great expertise about financial aid, very specific advice, and they'll also do counseling outside of these sessions that they're offering. For those of you that are really thinking about individual colleges and want to get a sense of what the cost might be for an individual school, colleges back in 2011 were required by the federal government to put together net price calculators. And this link here, which we'll also provide to you, can give you access to any school's net price calculator. So you can predict what colleges would cost. If your finances are really complicated, more complicated than my simple 1040. You might end up calling the financial aid office to ask more questions, but it can really give a pretty good gauge about what the cost of attendance will be, and what you might expect to see as your tuition bill. The two forms, if you've gone through this before, it probably doesn't sound any different. The two forms, the FAFSA and the CSS profile, still the same two forms, though they've gone through a number of different revisions. It's one of the areas that College Money Method has been really great with this year, walking families through the CSS profile, and the FAFSA is set for some changes for next year. So those are still the two forms. You apply around the same time as you're applying for admission, and both applications become available October 1, so pretty early on. And then, of course, some families are looking to access merit scholarships. There's some that you can just apply for admission, and a merit scholarship is automatically going to be something that your student is considered for. Others that will have applications and so forth to apply for merit scholarships. And then we also point students toward many different websites that are available for outside scholarships that can begin to bring the price down of student loans and so forth. So much more information on financial aid as the months go on. We didn't want to leave without talking a bit about it. But that is the full program for tonight. So thank you for being here tonight. If you need to leave, we get it. Otherwise, we are happy to answer any kind of questions that you might have. I know it can, these orange chairs are very comfortable in the beginning, and then you sink down into them. And you might be sinking into the ideas and the things that we've been talking about as well. But we are happy to stick around for questions, and we will send a recording of this this evening out. So if you all want to watch it again and again, or if those who haven't been able to come tonight want to watch it, they have the full recording as well. Thank you so much for coming. We'll be here to answer